What's up guys, welcome back to Let's Build the Ultimate Theme Park. My name's Attacking Toucans, and currently we're taking a look at the newest coaster that we've been building over the past couple episodes, named Jumanji. It's an Ellison launch blitz coaster that takes you on a lot of interesting coaster elements through the jungle. In this episode, we're going to be building 2 new roller coasters in the park, well technically 3. One of them is going to be the most simplistic coaster we've put in the park so far, and the other is going to be the best coaster we've put in the whole entire park so far. And I am so excited for you guys to see the newest coaster that I built, because I am like so personally proud of it, and it goes hard, man. But to build up to it, let's start off with the smaller coaster, which is going to be an intimate impulse coaster. I had this empty spot of land at the very entrance of the park near the parking lot, and I really wanted to fill it with something that made the park look even cooler from the entrance. And I decided that since we don't have any of those mid-budget roller coasters in this park that are one of those launched half coasters, I thought it'd be the perfect type of coaster to fill up this little plot of land that we have in our opening plaza. Now these types of coasters were more popular in the early 2000s when this was like a cooler gimmick to have for a coaster, but they're not really wildly popular amongst like the general public anymore because it's not a full coaster. It's more like in the mixture of like a roller coaster and a thrill ride, so there's not as much re-rideability. So pretty much all it does is it launches back and forth between 2 twisted spires. And the tallest intimate impulse coaster in the world is in Cedar Point, and it's 215 feet tall. It's called the Wicked Twister. There's one that's going to take that record soon in this new theme park they're opening in China, where they're going to be building one that's 229 feet tall. And fun fact, this is going to be the first intimate impulse coaster opening up in the past 16 years, because these things aren't wildly popular, because they're like one of those rides that doesn't have a lot of re-rideability. So whenever you go to a theme park, they usually have really short lines. Not very many people are trying to get on them. So because of that, they haven't built one in America recently. They were more so a fad in the 2000s, and because of that, I might even replace this coaster with something else in a future episode because it literally took me no time to build, so I would have no problem replacing it. But it's cool to have one, at least for a little bit, just to talk about them. Now, the one I built just now isn't quite tall enough to be considered the tallest one in the world, so in the next episode, I'm just going to make it a little bit taller just so we can have that record. So typically these coasters are around 185 feet tall, but just so we can have the record for the tallest one, I'm going to make this one 230 feet in the long run. An interesting fact, but in Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, there's a building restriction in that town where you can only build things up to 150 feet. So because of that limit, they had to make one of the spires at a 45-degree angle for their impulse coaster, so it wouldn't go over that height limit. I'm not sure why you'd build a theme park in a city that has building restrictions like that, but I guess maybe it was a mistake, who knows? Or maybe they added it later, I don't know. But yeah, these things were popular in the past just because they aren't too expensive. They're only like $8 to $9 million, which isn't too bad as far as roller coasters go. And something else I thought was funny is all of these coasters have really cool but like over-the-top names. There's one called Possessed, there's Vertical Velocity, Steel Venom, Wicked Twister, and because of these names I thought we needed to have a really cool over-the-top name for this coaster as well. So I decided to name it the Vengeful Venomous Volcanic Velocity, also known as the V, which kind of works because it's kind of shaped like a V, more like a U, but it still works. We'll just use our imagination. I'm building a pretty simplistic station for now. I'm going to come back and like decorate this area more, but I really wanted to get into building the other coaster in this park, so I decided to only do some basic scenery for now. The type of coaster I might replace this with in the future is one that's based off of this new coaster model that's in the Nickelodeon Universe theme park. That's this new theme park they're opening in this mall in New Jersey. And it's going to have this roller coaster called Sandy's Blasting Bronco, which is another coaster that's similar to this impulse coaster, but it goes in a complete loop and is a bit longer. And I feel like something like that might look even more impressive in this area. And the Blasting Bronco isn't quite open yet. I think it's still testing, but it's the last coaster I think they need to open in that Nickelodeon theme park. And this mall that they're building it in has been like this work in progress for like 15 years. I watched this mini documentary about it. It's really interesting to see like how many stages it had to go through and how crazy it is that it's finally opening. But it's breaking some coaster records. And it even has these 2 Teenage Mutant Ninja themed coasters that are like really cool and they like intertwine. I might take some inspiration from it in the future even. But I really hope this mall and indoor theme park is successful because I'd like to go there someday. And I think it's also cool that these indoor theme parks are being themed after Nickelodeon. It's like Nickelodeon is being the Disneyland for indoor theme parks, which is an interesting concept to think about. But all the rides in the indoor theme park in Mall of America are all themed after Nickelodeon as well. But enough talking about Nickelodeon indoor theme parks, that's kind of lame. Let's talk about the coaster that we're building, or well, in this case, it's 2 separate coasters. So for the next coaster project that we're going to be starting, I am building a dueling RMC Hybrid coaster. So we're gonna have two separate coasters that are RMC wooden hybrid coasters that are gonna race alongside each other, they're gonna twist around each other, and there's gonna be parts where one's doing a 0G stall or a 0G roll over the other. It's gonna be pretty awesome, and in my opinion, this is probably the sickest coaster in the park once we get done with it. Or coasters, I guess. But in case you don't know, RMC coasters, RMC stands for Rocky Mountain Construction, which is a relatively newer coaster manufacturer that's based in America. They're found in northern Idaho in the Rocky Mountains, given the name. And this company has pretty much revolutionized the theme park game over the past decade. And they've done this by taking old wooden coasters that have kind of gone out of date, that have these gigantic wooden supports and frames, but are just not being ridden very much anymore because wooden coasters get old and really rattly, and sometimes just the elements of them get out of date. They take these coasters and they replace the track with this new track style they invented called the eye box. It's a big steel beam that's shaped like an eye that is twisting around. Now these coasters are known for being very, very smooth, and they can do tons of amazing elements because of the type of track that they have. Since they ride so smoothly, they're really good for doing tons of like crazy 90 bank, overbank turns, 0G elements. A really popular element is one that we put on the last coaster, but it's an outer banked overbank curve. And RMC, using this new method of coaster refurbishment, has literally turned some of the coasters that had become really old and jank into some of the best coasters in the whole entire world that have gotten to the very tops of people's coaster lists. The most popular example of this is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. There was this coaster at Cedar Point called the Mean Streak, which was the tallest wooden coaster in the world with the longest drop height, but they had to close it after 25 years because it was just getting too old and people weren't really sure what was going to happen to it. Then RMC came through, replaced and retracked the whole entire thing with their new iBox track, and that was considered one of the most fun and innovative wooden coasters in the world. So it's really cool that they're doing this, and almost every single theme park in the world seems to want RMC to come through and refurbish one of their wooden coasters. And I didn't know a lot about RMCs until recently because I hadn't ridden very many. The only two that I've ridden are the Twisted Colossus, which is kind of what this coaster is based off of a little bit, and that's found in California at Magic Mountain. And the other one I've ridden is the second coaster that RMC made, and that is Outlaw Run at Silver Dollar City. And that's the one that I've like told the story where I got the Charlie horse because of the leg constraints on the carts. So I didn't really have a good taste of that coaster in my mouth, but after learning a lot more about RMCs, I have realized that they're one of the best types of coasters out there, and I definitely need to give Outlaw Run a second chance whenever I go back to Missouri. So the coasters that I personally took the most inspiration from when designing this coaster were Steel Vengeance and New Texas Giant when it came to like how spread out the coaster was, because I wanted to have like a big middle space opened up to put like another coaster in the center in a future episode. But I also took inspiration from Twisted Colossus with the whole entire dueling element. Although the difference between Twisted Colossus and this coaster is Twisted Colossus is just one roller coaster, where you go around the track twice and end up like racing yourself. You go up the chain lift, you go around one time, and you go up the chain lift again, and then you go around a second time. This coaster is about 5,000 feet long, so if I made it go around twice, it'd be around 10,000 feet, which would be way, way too long for a coaster, at least one of this type. So I decided to make it two separate coasters. And I wanted to make the coasters slightly different so you had incentive to ride both of them, but they were still similar enough to where it felt like the race was fair. Now the biggest challenge when creating this coaster was just trying to keep the coaster trains in line with one another, because I wanted them to be going up and down the hills all around the same time so it seemed like they were neck and neck racing, and I wanted them to like pass each other back and forth as you were going along the track as well, so you felt like you were getting ahead, and then you would get ahead and you would be like celebrating for a bit, and then the other coaster would come and pass you and you'd be like, dang it, you try to like speed yourself up again. Well, you can't really do that, but mentally you're trying to speed yourself up with your telekinesis powers. So real fast, a quick rundown of everything the coaster does so far. So both trains leave the station, they get a little bit of speed and then do some twists around each other, and they both go up the chain lifts. After the chain lift, they both go down a really steep hill over an airtime hill, which is going to give a lot of negative G's. It goes over a giant overbank just to kind of cut the speed a little bit, goes back down, and then one of the tracks does a 0G roll, and the other does an outer banked overbank turn over the 0Z roll, and they both dip back down, go back up into a curve, they kind of twist around each other, and then they do a barrel roll into a dive drop, gain quite a bit of speed while doing that. And then I'm doing a 0Z stall, where the coaster is going upside down, hanging completely upside down for a second, and then twisting back the same direction into another curve. On the coaster right now, I have both tracks doing a 0Z stall, upside down, but I think next time I come back to the park, I'm gonna have one of the tracks go underneath the 0G stall so they can like touch hands, like, because one of the coasters, the people will be upside down and the other people will be upright, and make them like right on top of each other. And then on the next hill, I'm gonna have it do another Gyro Z stall, but I'm gonna have both trains go inwards at a 90-degree angle, so they both face one another, so they'll be across from each other, and they could possibly they can try to touch hands at that point as well. They're not actually going to be able to touch hands, like they're going to be far enough away to where they can't do that, but it's going to give you the feeling like you feel like you could, and that's what makes it really cool and kind of interactive. And then after that, the tracks are going to head back towards the stations, and they're going to criss and cross and kind of like dive down slowly afterwards and have a bunch of bunny hills, so you get lots of small airtime moments, and they're both going to like twist around into a helix back into the station. So that's a kind of simplistic description. Later when we ride the coasters, I'll kind of like describe the elements again so you'd better understand what I'm talking about. I just wanted to give a quick rundown of all the elements that I put into this coaster for those who are interested in coaster elements. Now for this episode, I cut a lot out of the footage of me building this coaster. I had to go through and like build a lot of the parts 3 or 4 times, because one of my goals for this coaster was to make every single element from scratch, not to use any of the pre-made elements, so I could really have just a lot of control over everywhere where the coaster goes. And I think it definitely paid off. But yeah, I cut out like all of the failed attempts, which is why it seems like I'm building this coaster a lot more quickly than I actually did. And I also cut out a lot of the moments where I had to go back and smooth it out. And one of the things you just saw me change is I fixed the very first airtime hill, because it was a little bit too flat at first, and I wanted to make it just have a nice like dippy flow to it, a nice wave, and make the whole entire thing just a lot more smooth looking. And then after editing the footage of this episode, I always notice things that I want to do differently and do better. So I'm going to go back through off camera and edit things as well. And I'm just trying to constantly make the coasters better and better in this park. I've even gone and made some like minor adjustments to the very first coasters I've built in the park. I just haven't really shown them because they weren't really big enough to like show off, but I just changed things because I want everything to be perfect in this park. And I want to make a correction about a mistake I made last episode where I called Zadra at Energylandia the biggest wooden coaster in the world. The reason I made that mistake is because Energylandia actually lists Zadra as a wooden roller coaster, but in fact it's not. It's a hybrid. It's an RMC coaster actually, and it has a steel track. But for some reason they list it as a wooden coaster, and that has a lot of coaster enthusiasts pissed off that they do that, because they're trying to like claim a record they don't actually have by claiming that one of their coasters that's not completely a wooden coaster is a wooden coaster. And I feel like it's an honest mistake. I just saw the Zadra at the top of a list for top wooden coasters, and I didn't think to like fact check it, I guess, which I should have done, since I shouldn't be like spouting fake knowledge on the internet. But sometimes you don't know if you're saying fake facts or not. That's like the problem. But I guess I could just do a better job at keeping myself accountable. So overall, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this, that the biggest challenge when creating this coaster was to keep the trains in line with one another. And another thing that was really annoying was the supports actually got in the way a lot. I couldn't get the tracks too close to each other. As you can see, there's these really long beams sometimes that's holding the track up, and they'll be like really long and diagonal, and they would get in the way and like would chop people's heads off if I misplaced the tracks. So it was really annoying trying to get the tracks to overlap and crisscross a lot, but not have the carts get stabbed by these big metal beams. But the ways that I kept the trains close to one another, where I just kind of modified the sizes of the turns and the hills. If one of the trains was falling behind a little bit, I would just make the hill a little bit smaller so it would go over and down a little bit faster and they would level out. And I would just constantly do that with every single hill. I would watch the trains go through the coaster, and then I would adjust a couple of the hills and the turns to make them a little bit longer, and just like modify the coaster so things would be within 1 to 2 seconds of each other, and it worked out pretty well. And something else I did after building this coaster is I went back and I banked the curves a lot more, because on RMC coasters there's just a lot of just 90-degree banks and really over the top bankage, because that's just kind of what these coasters are known for. So I went through and just like over banked everything so it would be a lot more smooth in that aspect. And now getting to this ending section of the coaster, we have like a big conglomeration of tracks just like weaving around each other with both parts of this RMC and the launching coaster. I think it's funny how both of these coasters are dueling and they're crisscrossing each other, but there's like 6 separate tracks just all in this small little area, and I'm gonna have to do some pretty interesting scenery to properly separate these coasters. I haven't fully figured out how I'm gonna decorate this ride. I have some really interesting ideas that are a bit more abstract that are like really over the top that I think might be kind of cool. I'm gonna experiment and kind of like treat this as a little bit of an art project and like see what happens. But I have some good ideas, and I also am thinking about making this themed after Pokemon Sword and Shield and naming both of these coasters after the 2 legendaries from that game. But I still haven't fully figured it out yet. Like, I'm always just kind of figuring this out as I go. I have lots of ideas, and it's hard for me to make the final decisions, and that's why it takes a while for episodes of this series to come out sometimes, is because sometimes I just can't make my mind up. There's just too many options, man. But also, you might notice that there was like a big open space in the middle of this coaster, because this dueling coaster just kind of goes around like a perimeter almost. There's a big open space, and I plan to put a second coaster in that space. And I still haven't figured out what type of coaster I want to put there. If you guys have any suggestions or any types of coasters that you really want to see in this park that we don't have yet, let me know down in the comments. I'm open to suggestions because I know there are still a lot of coaster types that have not been represented. I still want to make a single rail in the park. I want to have a mine train. I need to add a few more kiddie coasters, like some really small coasters. I want to have a bobsled coaster if possible. And if I can manage it, I think it'd be really cool to do an X Dimension coaster, but that'll take a lot of research in order to make a really good version of one of those. But apart from those types of coasters, if there's any others that you think should get some representation in this park, let me know and I'll look into them, because it's possible that your favorite type of coaster is one that I'm just not very familiar with, and I just need to do a bit of research. Kind of like RMC. I wasn't very aware of RMC coasters until recently, and now that I know about them, I'm just like, whoa, this is everything to me. So I'm getting pretty close to finishing this coaster. Like I said, I'm really proud of how it's come together and how smooth the whole entire thing is. I mean, this coaster type is really smooth in general, but you gotta make a lot of the curves and hills smooth as well. And just the amount of times I was able to make these tracks cross as well kind of impresses me. I think they crossed like 9 or 10 times, which is quite a bit, especially for the types of supports that are on this coaster. As far as the colors go, I'm still not entirely sure with what I want to do. I kind of wish we could paint it like the RMC coaster, the Joker, where both of the tracks are different colors, and then I could have 4 different colors on this coaster. I don't think that's an option. Maybe it is. I doubt it though. But it would be really cool if it was, because then I could have like 4 different colors just on the landscape. And we're about to ride both of the coasters, but before we finish up, I just want to finish placing some of these paths. It's really cool just seeing all of these paths come together and connect up in this back corner, and just seeing it all start to take shape. We're getting to the point where almost every single section of the park has something to fill it up now. I feel like the only really large area that I still have to create is the Kiddie Land, which is going to have like a lot more kiddie rides and the kiddie coasters. But it's really cool to seeing this like desert adventure area being built back here. And I'm going to have like the small little Pokemon land that's going to have the Pokemon Snap ride that I'm probably going to start building next episode. Like, that's probably going to be my next thing, is I want to build a target shooting ride, because I've been wanting to do that for a really long time. I just haven't fully figured out where I wanted it to go, but I finally have it like mapped out in my brain, so I'm going to start doing that next episode probably. But yeah, just connecting up the chairlift and this new roller coaster, getting this space all filled up. It's all starting to look pretty full. We're going to add a lot more decorations and buildings in the future, of course. But for now, I think that's about it. So let's go ahead and ride these coasters. So starting off with the orange side, which is probably my least favorite of the two. I think they're both really good, but I think I prefer the purple one. We had fun with the banking at the beginning since we're going pretty slow. Have an outer bank, and it goes into an inner bank before going into an inline roll. The purple coaster does an inline underneath the coaster as well, so it kind of seems like they're twisting at that point. And it goes into a helix where they crisscross again, and then it starts the chain lift, which is pretty quick. It goes up about 14 miles per hour. And my game's frame rate isn't fantastic right now because I had the park open for quite a while. I was building this coaster, but I'll try to get a better frame rate later on. Also, the purple coaster has been racing alongside us this whole entire time. The orange one just has a little bit of a head start, but you'll be able to see it right here. The purple one gets a little bit of a lead. So you start off by going down a 80-degree incline into a really large airtime hill. You go to a big overbank where the tracks are going to crisscross once, go down a hill that leads to the 0G roll, and on this point, the purple coaster goes on top of it and does an outer bank curve, which is going to be a really thrilling part at a height like that. It goes into a quick little turnaround that leads into a barrel roll that turns into a dive drop, which I think this is one of the coolest looking elements on an RMC. Freaking love it. Just went through a 0G stall that I'm going to modify in between episodes probably. Have another pretty large drop right here that goes into another 0G stall, but this one at a 90-degree angle with both of the tracks facing towards one another. And then we have the smaller elements towards the end, the little bunny hills, as it kind of like drops down. It still gets quite a bit of speed and crosses over. It looks really cool, and I think it's a really good ending to the coaster, a little memorable part. In comparison to other RMCs, this one is a little bit longer, probably not the longest, but it has a decent length to it. And I would personally say that it kind of holds up to all the other RMCs that I've seen in real life. I mean, mine's probably not as good, but it's also the first RMC I've ever built. Wait for a few more years of me getting some experience and I'll probably build some better ones. But now we're gonna ride the purple coaster, and you guys are probably tired of hearing my voice, so I'll just let you guys watch this one and just listen to the video game sound, because the sound design of this game is awesome, and the RMC sound design sounds really realistic and awesome. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, guys.